Something else that came to my attention, and so again serves as a reminder that these contactors are polarity specific on the contacts. So you'll have one that's marked plus A1 and then A2 minus. Okay, so the most positive goes to the positive A1. So that would be coming from the battery pack, and then your A2 minus would be going to your controller. You can see this was backwards if I zoom out, because this is the cable that went from the contactor to the controller. So we're going to swap that around. I fixed the brake light switch, so that works. I had to fix one of the turn signals. That now works. And I've mounted all the components on our board here, with the exception of the controller, which we're letting the sealant dry, and then I'm going to put on the coolant fittings. We're going to go with a little different fitting than what was on there. And so that part's just about done. So, like I mentioned before, now that we know the chassis wiring is okay, the horn doesn't work, but I'm not going to look into that. Brakes, turn signals, we're not going to be driving this on the road anyway, but somebody else can fix the horn and any other electrical or mechanical issues that are pertinent to the Jeep. We're just a conversion shop. So some of these things we just kind of do as a courtesy, so that they test drive it and so forth, they at least have brake lights and turn signals. I like a horn. I don't use my horn very often, but it's a nice thing to have. You know, if you can be sitting in a parking lot and somebody's about ready to back into you. Boom. You want to use the horn. I always have my horns so that whether the ignition's on or not, if I press that horn, it goes off. So anyway, the next step after getting the controller mounted will be starting to wire up the conversion. So we're going to start with the KSI circuit first and go through all of the safety cutouts that we have. There'll be 3 of them, and all the way to our KSI input. And then from there we'll start going to some of the auxiliary systems. So stay with us. That part we may show you a little more in depth. Just time constraints, and I don't get a chance to work on this just continually where we could do a video and do a time lapse where I get lots of interruptions, and so I steal time while I can, and it's not always convenient to turn on the camera. I have a limited amount of time, and so boom, I just make it happen. So anyway, that's the current status, and I got a few more things to do before I leave this location, and so I got to take care of those and get out of here. Here's the component board with all the components attached. Again, this isn't necessarily the way I would have done it, but you know, we're just making some repairs and completing this thing. So the total redesign and everything just takes a little more time, and so we're conscious of the billable hours, and so not a total redesign. We're going to reuse as much wiring as possible, and so forth. We did change some hardware, so now the the charger and the controller and so forth are held down with 1/4-inch bolts and nylon stop nuts. Everything before was held down with number 8 screws. So we replaced those, and no locking devices in most cases. All of that would have made this, just a time bomb that, all the vibration, everything, those things would come loose. So the contactors are held on with, the holes fit a number 10 screw. So they're all number 10 screws with nylon stop nuts, so forth. So everything is secure. The only component that's not mounted in the vehicle yet is the throttle. And we ordered they had a throttle rod, which doesn't work with the type of pedal there was. It was all rigid. It just, again, it wouldn't work very long. And so we've ordered a stock throttle cable for this vehicle. And that will, it's a cable and a sleeve, and it will plug into the firewall, connect on the throttle pedal, and then I think the one I ordered is 23 inches long. He had 3 sizes to choose from depending on the engine that was in the thing. 18, 23, and 36 I think it was. So I went with the 23, which is going to give us some ability to put this throttle somewhere, and I haven't decided yet. We'll wait till the cable comes in. This is a Monday. It's coming in on Wednesday. So between now and then, I'd like to get all the wiring done. And so what we're going to do is, starting with the battery, we're going to wire all of the non-switched or unswitched 12-volt items. So for instance, the JLD 404 uses unswitched 12 volts. It's always powered on. The AVC2 is always powered. There's power that goes directly from the battery to the vacuum pump and to the power steering. So there are those things that require an unswitched 12-volt source. Well, as you could see back before we added the components, there was this 100 amp fuse on the firewall right here. And so we'll attach those items at that point. So it goes directly from the battery, positive, to one side of the fuse. The other side of the fuse is where we're going to connect those items. So it's all fused between the battery, and all these items have a separate fuse anyway. But we're just going to go on that side, and instead of having a bunch of things attached to the positive terminal there, we're going to go to that terminal post on the one side of that fuse. And so we'll wire those things first, make sure that we have power, and then we'll start wiring the switched items, the items that are switched with the ignition. And most notably will be our KSI signal. And so we'll turn on the ignition. It's going to power this relay. So all the ignition is going to do is provide us enough current to activate the coil in that relay, close those contacts, and then we're going to take, again, that's an unswitched 12 volt section. The common on this relay will go to unswitched 12 volts. It'll go directly from there to the fuse block on the firewall, which is just below the main fuse, right there. And that will then distribute all of our fused sub-circuits, the fans and the cooling fans and pump, and other things that are activated with the ignition, and we fuse all of our circuits. So that's what's next. I got to kind of figure out, some of the wires, well, most of the wires already run. I got to make sure that it's run, correctly from, that it's all wired correctly. Let's just say that. And proper size wire also. I've seen a lot of mixed gauged wires, which is not appropriate. And so we're going to fix all of that at the same time. But for now, it's a lot of, under the dash, looking where things are running, that kind of thing. And, but it's not that bad. We'll quickly figure it out and do that. And once I've got that done, we'll test, like I said, those circuits, and then we'll do the ignition switch, and we'll test all those. When we get to testing those, we'll run up the vacuum pump. We're going to check and make sure that the power steering plumbing connections are connected and tight. Then we'll fill it with fluid. It's empty right now. We'll put power steering fluid in there, and then we'll test it, make sure the power steering works. There happened to be a little battery charger sitting on the passenger seat of this vehicle. So I guess they had already thought of the fact that they're going to need to keep this thing trickle charged. So we put that on overnight, and the battery's up to snuff now, and so we can do all of our testing with a fully charged battery. Well, working on the dash on this thing with the seats in is almost impossible. The distance between the seat and the roll bar here, I can't even get my torso in there. You just can't get the right angle of the dangle. So we'll see. May have to take the seat out, but we'll see. Luckily, the JLD 404 does come out of the dash, and so I've pulled it out. One of the things I've noticed all along is this gauge is in there crooked, and so I'm going to investigate that and see why that is, and see if we can't straighten that out. But the reason I'm speaking with you is I just wanted to point out that we've got all these green wires here, and it makes it difficult when tracing things if you use all the same color wire. So we typically use certain colors for certain things, and so you will have colors that are repeated, but not so much from a single destination, at least. That makes it a little bit easier in this kind of scenario where you're trying to track things down. So, and when you're by yourself here, I can pull on something. I got to look and see if it moved and so forth. But that's why I said this kind of takes a little bit of time to try to figure out what someone else has done and to see that it was wired correctly before we hook power to things. So that's what I'm doing, and I'll let you know if there's anything else that I think of that you should maybe be aware of or think about. Well, we're making progress. We've got the KSI circuit run, so that's the works in conjunction with the AVC2, so that's wired up. Our safety interlock, that's wired. We've got our power relay set up, so we have an ignition signal coming in, activates that. This takes power from the battery and energizes our fuse block down there. We've got a few of the wires that we've had identified that are just loosely running forward at the moment, but we're slowly cleaning out the rat's nest down there. We've got the vacuum pump hooked up. So let me show you on the inside here what things look like. So we can see we've got the battery connected. We've got our JLD 404 on. And so when I turn on the ignition, we'll see our volt gauge come alive and our green system, energized light will come on, and we'll hear the vacuum pump run. So turn on the ignition here. And so the vacuum pump came on and went off. Also have a amp light on right there. But and we can see that our 12-volt batteries, about 12.5 volts it looks like from this gauge. So anyway, that's what we have done so far. So next is to connect the wiring so that we can check the power steering. So first I'll do the wiring, make sure that's all correct. I could see just from the get-go that it's not. I know these things are supposed to have a 50 amp fuse. We always use a circuit breaker, and so we don't have that. We I don't know if that's a 50 amp relay down there. I'll have to take a look at that. I mean, that's what it calls for. So we want to make sure that we have the right components for the job, and then once the electrical is properly hooked up, then we can then we'll put fluid in and test it out. So there's a lot of wiring here. This is just stuff that's part of the chassis wiring that is not being used, because a lot of that would go to the engine components that don't, the internal combustion engine that don't exist. So same with these. Well, that's under hood light. That could possibly be used. This stuff. Reverse switch. That probably goes to the transmission. Yeah. But anyway, lots of stuff that needs attention, and we're slowly taking care of it. So we're getting there. Well, the power steering is connected and hooked up, or connected and filled with fluid. One thing I noticed is, they come for shock mounting, so it's a 3-point shock mount, but he's got it on a plate, and the plate, if I can get down here and see what I'm doing, let me put some light on the subject there. So this plate and this is the motor. Kind of hard getting a shot of the thing. What am I looking at here? There we go. So there's the motor right here. Well, you can see he's got it mounted on a plate, but the hole that it goes through is kind of tight. So it's transmitting noise through the body of the vehicle. So when we turn on the ignition and that comes on, it's going to be kind of noisy. So there you have it. The wheel turns easy. No problem. I mean, I can do it with one finger. You know. So that part's all good. It's just that it's a little noisy. But I guess there's worse things.